So we're going to begin. Thank you for coming tonight. We're going to do a first part of a three-part Ishbitz series. And the official title I have for tonight is Halacha and the Divine Will. What does God want from me? And I'm going to break up the shir into a short kind of overview of the Hasidic milieu that the Meshilach, the first Ishbitz Rabbi, came out of. A little bit about his teacher, Simcha Bonim of Shishka, who was a very important figure in the Hasidic world of Poland at that time. And he was the teacher of many of the famous Rabbis, the Kutzker Rebbe, people like that. And then we're going to talk about this kind of concept that the Meshloach is considered the creator, the innovator of this concept of this halachic man, although he didn't create that, versus the messianic figure that is embodied by Yehuda, King David, the house of David, that has the ability to go outside the law and connect with what God wants in a way that doesn't necessarily conform to halakha, the Jewish law. And we're going to do some of the source material from the Meshilach on that. And also we're going to explore as well his understanding not just of Yehuda, not just of why and not so much when, because he only gives one, to my knowledge, he only gives one example of when you should actually literally not keep the law because of knowing what God wants in any practical way. He only gives one example that I'm aware of, which he didn't innovate, which is a Hasidic innovation of davening after the proper time. He cites that as a kind of example of breaking the law to keep what God really would want. Or as his contemporary and wouldn't say necessarily Rabbi, but he was for a short time the Rosh Hashiva in Kutsk. Not that short, but he was the Rosh Hashiva in Kutsk. As the Kutzker said, this is a very kind of nasty comment, but telling to this way of thinking that Misnagdim fear the Shulchan Aruch, they fear the code of Jewish law, and Hasidim fear God. As if to say, sometimes you gotta get a little bit out of this structure to be able to get beyond it. But then one of the things that's often neglected, because this part of the Meshloach is probably one of the most famous parts of the Meshloach, is his deterministic view that seems to go hand in hand with his somewhat antinomian views. He has a very kind of a pretty clearly articulated view of everything being in the hands of heaven, and the free choice that we have being but an illusion. So there's a whole discussion amongst the interpreters of the Meshloach, including his own son and grandson, about kind of the limitations of that doctrine of Hakol B'dei Shemayim, that everything is in the hands of heaven, and that influences this concept of having some level of being with God outside of the law. Because if everything is outside of heaven, in the hands of heaven, that means that nothing is in your hands. If nothing is in your hands, the extreme version of that, according to the Rambam, one of his greatest fears, was that if people didn't believe in free choice, then where does commandments and halacha come in. So the Mashaloch has to reconfigure all of that, and he does. And the question is, where does that leave somebody who's influenced by his teachings? And is there any practical guidelines of how to live in any way different than just an ordinary halachic observant Jew? Does it impact them? We'll explore that question as well. But as I said, I want to also give a little bit more weight to the halachic side of the importance of halacha and its necessity, not just as a warm-up act to the eventual state of Yehuda, which goes and transcends the halacha, but also as a integral demarcating element of what it is to be a Jew versus a non-Jew, according to the Meshulach. Okay, that's the overview. That's good. Let's try to do some of that. So, everybody knows that the Polish Hasidism is tied into the founder of Polish Hasidism was Rabbi Melech Blazhensk, and his main student, the seer of Lublin, was really the one who put Poland on the map in terms of it becoming a center of Hasidism. Up until then, even in the lifetime of Rabbi Melech Blazhensk, before the seer successfully opened his own court, which overlapped for a number of years, there was hardly a chassid in Poland. But the seer had phenomenal success as a Rabbi. But the chassidus of the seer was very much a populist affair, which essentially meant, the way most people see it, is that it de-emphasized Torah study. One of the things the Baal Shem Tov did is he de-emphasized Torah study, and the reason why he did that was because it was a populist movement that was actually a reaction to the elitist movement that Judaism, to many were becoming in the hands of what were called the Misnagdim. They were just a ruling kind of class of rabbis at that time. And the different strains of Hasidus developed differently in terms of their relationship with the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, of how important that mitzvah was. And the emphasis in Lublin was on connecting to God. And in particular, the person who knew how to connect you to God was the Rabbi, was the seer of Lublin. And the seer of Lublin had a number of disciples who were outstanding. And one of them had the same name, was also the Yida Kadosh, because he had the same name. They gave him another nickname, the Holy Jew, which is a pretty cool name to have. And Rabbi Yaakov, the Holy Jew, was turned off. He was the right-hand man to the seer, but he couldn't take it anymore. He saw this kind of just watering down of everything, dumbing down of everything. And he was a brilliant scholar, a brilliant Talmudist. Essentially what he ended up doing is he ended up creating a breakaway movement. And to him the best and the brightest came. And he started emphasizing again studying Torah, Talmud, de-emphasized the study of Kabbalah,